Hi, it is Professor Schneiderman. It is Thursday. You get your lecture, and I know we're a little bit behind. You were supposed to have read book one of Other Voices, Other Rooms. This is the other cover for last Tuesday, and to have finished the book for this coming Tuesday, I'm going to give you a quiz on the ending of the book for next Tuesday. So please get through as much of it as you can. If you need to skip ahead to the end, I'll call your attention to a few passages when we discussed in class. And we're also going to read an essay about it by Hilton Als, and we'll do that in class, and I'll kind of guide you through that. It's also the case that if you don't have the book yet, it is in the New York Public Library e-collection. So if you set up your account with the New York Public Library, as long as you live within one of the 5 boroughs, nypl.org, you're fine. And then download their e-reader, and Other Voices, Other Rooms is available in the e-collection. I just downloaded it. So what I really want to say about Other Voices, Other Rooms, and this is going to be reflected in the question that I ask you as a quiz, is that these characters are not likable. That with both The Color Purple and with The Watermelon Woman, you have protagonists who you are on their side. You want Cheryl to recover the history of Faye Richards and to become a filmmaker. You want Celie to escape from this abusive situation and to find her way to love, to business, to happiness, to independence, to family. And you get that wish, right? In both cases, the wish that you have for the protagonist is fulfilled. In Other Voices, Other Rooms, it's a lot messier, and it reflects a really different way of thinking about queerness. We often have kind of inflection points when we do queer history. When we talk about queer history, there are often some places where we kind of like say that something happened that changed things. You've lived through one of them, the transgender tipping point, it was often called. Laverne Cox being on the cover of Time magazine after starring in Orange is the New Black and being a transgender woman playing a transgender role that's a main character. Caitlyn Jenner being on the cover of Vanity Fair. These were really big deals, and this changed public perception of transgender identity. Suddenly, everyone in America knows not to misgender someone. Everyone in America is putting pronouns in their emails, and it led to a different kind of visibility in the culture. So Sense8 cast transgender actors to play the transgender roles, or the transgender actress to play the transgender role. Pose is a huge deal. And up until this point, it was not the case that transgender actors typically play transgender roles. If you look at the main cultural productions, Dallas Buyers Club with Jared Leto playing a trans woman, Trans America with Felicity Huffman playing a trans woman, Boys Don't Cry with Hilary Swank playing what we would now understand as a trans man, that this was a really big deal. So you've lived through an inflection point. You've come to the other side and kind of seen something change in the culture. The big one that we usually talk about is Stonewall. And in 1969, and this is usually what we date gay liberation to, in 1969 at the Stonewall bar, a variety of people, when the cops came to arrest them, fought back. And there was a riot that lasted for days. There are lots of kind of amazing stories. Some of them I'm not so sure I quite believe, even though they're fantastic. That there was this, my favorite is that there was, the police, the New York police had actually created a division that was based on a kind of Roman soldier in which they had these, these giant riot shields they would hold in front of them, and they would form this wall of shields and then march forward to quell riots or protests. And as they walked down, kind of linked arms with their shields in front of them to try to clear the street, the queens ran behind them and formed a kick line, and they sang a song that was popular at the Stonewall. And if you ask me in class, I can sing the song for you. But and I'm not sure I quite believe that story. It sounds a little too good to be true. I'm sure some version of that happened. There's a lot of lore around Stonewall. If you read the interviews with people who are actually there, there are some conflicting accounts. But Stonewall really created a sharp division, and at least when we do the history, a sharp division between a kind of homophile movement from the 1940s and 1950s that was really focused on a kind of assimilationist approach to gay and lesbian liberation into something a little more radical, something that my favorite anthology of writings from that period, from the 70s, is called Smash the Church, Smash the State. I mean, these are people who wanted to like have a real revolution. The Gay Liberation Front, which is one of the movements, one of the organizations that came out of Stonewall, chose their name to match the Viet Cong, right? They were actually imitating the name of the organization that the United States was fighting in Vietnam. It was a very provocative name to have chosen. And after Stonewall, gay identity was very much built around the closet, right? The idea of I'm in the closet and no one knows that I'm gay, or I'm out of the closet and people do know that I'm gay. And this idea of the closet is in many ways a very effective organizing strategy, right? Because if you're in the closet, you're lying. You're not telling the truth to the people around you. And if you're out of the closet, you're telling the truth. And it extends, right? You can even be in the closet to yourself. You can be denying to yourself what you really are, and then you can come out of the closet to yourself. And so this truth value really inflects the way that we think about identity and queerness. And so for Cheryl and for Celie, this kind of question of the truth of who they are is a very different question than it is for Randolph and for Joel. And prior to Stonewall, the metaphor for homosexuality, we have phrases like being in the life, right? Are you in the life? The origin of the word gay seems to have been a kind of code, like, do you go to gay parties? And that was a way of communicating things safely. If you wanted to indicate, as a man, if you wanted to indicate your, what we would now call gay identity to the people around you, you might drop a few hairpins, right? You might let your hair down. And so you have these other ideas that are not built around telling the truth or lying, but are built around where you can let things be shown and where you can be buttoned up, right? That it's less like, are you telling the truth or are you lying? And more like, are you wearing a suit or are you wearing a t-shirt, right? And so with Randolph and with Joel, the way that they experience queerness is very different and maybe quite unfamiliar. And so when you're reading through the novel, really think about what's going on with Joel. I also find Idabel the most interesting character. I'm actually really, really fascinated by Idabel, and we can talk about Idabel when we get to that. It's also the case that this is still the time when inversion is understood as a dominant understanding of queer identity. And inversion, which we do not have anymore, it went away. This fascinates me as well. But inversion was really unpleasant because inversion is sort of a recipe for unhappiness. Inversion is the idea that a male invert is what we would call a gay man now, or possibly a trans woman, but is a female spirit inside a man's body, and vice versa. And the idea being that it doesn't separate sex and gender, right? It's sort of like, it puts them together. And I don't think we can separate sex and gender. I think that's the foundation of Judith Butler's work. But when you're reading this novel, just pay attention that there are formations of sex and gender that are particularly focused on Randolph, that are weird. and that may be unfamiliar, and sort of try to trace those and think about what's happening to Joel. I think Zoo and I think that Idabel are actually like that. That's where my attention keeps wandering as I read the book. But yes, they're terrible. You probably won't like them. It's very upsetting. Joel should get back to 7th grade. He's not going to. Sorry. But that's part of the point, and we will talk about that on Tuesday. Okay. Read as much as you can. Skip ahead to the end if you need to. Answer the quiz, and I'll see you on Tuesday. And we'll start Paris is Burning, and we're actually going to accelerate, and you'll actually have watched Paris is Burning by the time you come to class the Tuesday after next. Okay.